tissue cleansing, what is it? What does it mean? People often wonder, what does this mean, tissue cleansing? What it means is we're removing the accumulated waste matter and the pathogens that are embedded in them and growing in them. We're removing that from the tissues. Cells combine to make tissues, and so we're removing the rubbish from the cells and the tissues. So you can call it cellular cleansing, you can call it tissue cleansing, deep cellular cleansing, deep tissue cleansing. There's, as long as one understands that what we're aiming to do is take out which is not meant to be there in order for the life force to conduct and pulse through the cells and tissues, so that one feels optimally energetic and optimally energized and hugely vital. So when there's rubbish and accumulation in the cells and tissues, we have symptoms, all manner of symptoms. And when we remove the rubbish from the cells and tissues, the symptoms go away. So by tissue cleansing and through tissue cleansing, we remove those uncomfortable, agonizing, life-defeating symptoms, whether they're little niggling symptoms or they're huge, destructive symptoms that are huge symptoms that are indicating that the body's really falling into ruin. We're getting rid of the cause, the original cause behind those symptoms, which brings up a very important point. With allopathic medicine, the goal is always to remove the symptom. We're aiming to remove the cause of the symptoms, and this is the cause of all the symptoms. And when we do that, we just we solve the whole problem. And it seems people say, well, that sounds so easy. It is so easy, and that's the message I really want to get across. Is it's so easy to fix the body. It's so easy to get rid of the symptoms. It's so easy to overcome all of it. But if you address the symptoms without addressing the cause, you'll never get there. You'll just wind up, most people have multiple symptoms. They have intestinal issues, they have poor skin, they have headaches, they have joint pain, they usually they don't have a lot of energy. All these things usually come in concert together. So if you were to address each one, then you would be taking a pill for each different symptom. You would be looking for, what you could maybe change dietetically for each symptom. And it makes no sense to understand that all the symptoms are caused by the same thing, the obstruction in the tissue, the waste matter, the saturation, and the pathogens that are growing in this tissue. And you correct that, then you've solved the whole problem. And, I could go on and on in terms of how many symptoms most people are walking around with. I mentioned a few, but add to that dental issues and then getting sick all the time with flus and colds, bronchial issues. It's endless, and it always goes hand in hand with your physical symptoms. Are always going to go hand in hand with emotional symptoms and mental symptoms. So, for example, you may have chronic headaches, and then you're going to also be depressed because of that, and you're also going to have trouble focusing because of that. So every level, every field of the being winds up suffering when the cause of a symptom, a physical symptom, is there. It makes it impossible to connect spiritually properly, because if you're not able to focus, if you're in pain physically, and if you're depressed, you're not going to be able to feel that which is the realness around you. You're only going to be able to feel what you're suffering from. So you get really stuck in your suffering, and then you're trying to solve that suffering, whether it's with yummy tasty things, or with things that will numb you, with alcohol, with pharmaceutical medications, with all of these things, and ultimately you're never really getting true pleasure. You're never really getting out of the prison sentence. You're never really getting out of the pain, the suffering. You're just chasing the symptoms all day long on each level, and that alone in of itself is exhausting, and it's unsatisfying because you never actually get to the end of it. So all day long, it's okay. So when do I take my next pill? Oh wait, what am I needing right now? Why am I miserable? What can I plan to make myself feel better? Oh, you're just chasing and chasing and chasing, and you never really get to live. And truly living is being in a place of wonderful peace. Peace is not a deadness. It's not boring. True peace is actually an aliveness in the body that's not interfered with by external concerns, worries, stimulation. It's the natural pulse of life where you just feel blissed out, you just feel euphoric, and most people never get to feel that, but that's the natural state of the human being. If you're feeling agitated, you're not going to be so inclined to tune into the other person, understand what's going on. You'll be quick to react. You'll be quick to blame, to go back to your stories. One of the things that when we talk about cleaning up one's life is getting over your stories, understanding your stories, and then moving beyond them, because your stories are a false identity. Your true identity is, I like to describe it as the behind, the behind, the behind. So what's behind what we think we are? Well, our energetic blueprint, our essence. And what's behind that? Spirit. And what does that comprise? Soul. So if we identify with soul, if we identify with this energetic blueprint, this beautiful field of light, then we're able to freely give, freely take things in, have a genuinely open mind, and be non-judgmental. If we're seeing everything through the lens of the identity that we put together based on our stories and our gripes and our shame and our all the things that we've come to believe ourselves to be based on how we were raised and the things that we've taken on, we're basically judging everything we see based on that lens. And it's crippling. It's the opposite of freedom. So we need to drop, to clean those stories, to understand them. They have a place. They affected us, and they affected our field. But they're not meant to do that forever. They're not meant to cripple us forever. They're meant to act as opportunities to learn how to grow our soul. And then when we release them, we are able to be in that state of bliss, in peace, and not think that, oh, well, I'm not doing anything right now, and then equating boredom with peace, and that's not the same thing. We should be seeking out peace more than anything, because only in that state of peace can we get to our true essence, and in our true essence, we get super inspired. And when we're super inspired, we become incredibly creative. And when we're feeling creative, we're in that space, that childlike space, where nothing worries us, nothing concerns us. We don't want anything. We're so overjoyed and satisfied by just being, because we're that beingness is maybe you're painting, maybe you're singing, maybe you're writing a song, maybe you're playing your instrument, maybe you're coming up with new recipes, maybe you're just connecting. But it's fulfilling, and when we're fulfilled naturally from our essence and from that state of being that's connected with life, then we're not looking outside of ourselves for satisfaction, stimulation, pleasures. Our being is our sustenance, and that, why is that hugely liberating? It's hugely liberating. Why is it hugely liberating? Because we're not worried about how we're going to use our energy to create resources that we'll only wind up using to spend on things that we shouldn't have to take in to begin with, that will only undermine us, will only weaken us. So it frees us up to do the things we truly want to do with our time, rather than be a slave to it. Our addictions and to our fears of not having certain things that other people, sort of we go around thinking that we should have, simply because we're so addicted to them. All of these external things that we do that are just filling our time. It's basically like when you think about starch, for example. It's like it's filler. We talk about turkey and stuffing. Okay, so there's all this stuffing that's going in. Well, in our lives, we're surrounded by stuffing too. And if we fill our lives with the stuffing of the social things, or the things that our culture tells us are the right use of our time, but if we take a moment out of culture and we get into peace, we realize it's not the right use of our time, we realize that it is just stuffing. It's like these engagements that we're told we should do are just stuffing us up with and clogging us. So in effect, we have to clean those things out. We have to say enough of these things. It doesn't matter if everyone around you thinks that you should be at this particular event because everybody's going to be there and you're expected to, and maybe because you're a parent and all the other parents are going to be there. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've had to bow out of something that was like, I would suppose, if I was a good mom, I would be doing X, Y, or Z. And upon reflection, that was obviously just, somebody's definition of what a good mother is. Whereas I believe that what a good mother is doing that which connects you fully to the network of life so that you can demonstrate to your children what it is to not only not be addicted and not be motivated by people's by social conditioning and other people's projections on you, but to genuinely be fulfilled without any of the external stuff. Because if you can demonstrate that to your child, then they will never waste their internal resources, their time, their mental energy, all these things, trying to accumulate things that they've been told they should have and they should desire, when it's not only that they shouldn't desire it, but it's never going to fulfill them. So it's just a waste of energy. So what is the right use of that energy? We have to demonstrate that to them, which means that we don't just go along with what everybody does. We question it. Sometimes it is the right use of our time, but most of the time it isn't. It's hard because you want to do the things that will be gratifying, immediately gratifying, which is, everyone says, yes, you're at the right place at the right time. But long term, the question is always, you can ask yourself, is this going to deplete my energy, or is this going to fill my energetic reserves? And that's a perfect litmus test. Right, so what medicine will do is it's going to suppress the symptom. That's the whole point. So allopathic medicine equates to suppressing symptoms, in a nutshell. And we want instead to read the language of our body. The body's always talking to us, and symptoms are its way of communicating. So symptoms that are painful are communicating, please stop what you're doing. This isn't working for me. So then we have to take a look and say, well, what could be acidic? What could be causing the body to say, enough, this isn't suiting me? And the way symptoms work is they start out very subtle and very, just little niggles. The common cold, too much mucus, a little bit of a headache, fatigue. Maybe with children, often there'll be a little bladder infection, a little something that will just show there's too much acidity. The kidneys are very sensitive, so they're probably the most sensitive vital organ in the body. So they're the first line of alarm as per acidity in the body. So the second there's something happening in the bladder, kidney area, you know that there's acidity building up. Or there'll be a little rash, or there'll just be something small. And if that something small is suppressed because the parent thinks, okay, I'm going to be a good parent. I'm going to take my child to the doctor and see what this is. And the doctor is not going to let you out of their office without feeling like they've treated you. Because otherwise it's like, well, what are they there for? And so they're going to give you a prescription for something that's going to quell the symptom. But quelling the symptom is suppressing the symptom. So that the body's speaking in a rash, in a bladder infection, in a headache, in fatigue, in a sore throat, in excessive mucus, and then it just gets shut down. Well, what is that doing? That's basically muzzling the body. It's saying, we don't want to listen to you. We understand you have something to say, but we don't actually want to hear it. Just sort of, what people do to children all the time. So that the pureness, the innocence is always going to speak the truth. The body's going to speak the truth. And when it does, if it gets suppressed, what will happen is, if that toxicity is sent back into the tissue and it's told, well, we don't want to hear you, it's going to continue to accumulate, and the body's then going to have no other choice, because it's honest and it speaks clearly and honestly, it's going to come through with a more intense symptom. So it's not just going to be a little rash, it's going to be a huge rash. It's going to be acne. It's going to be rosacea. It's going to be eczema, psoriasis. It's not just going to be a sore throat. It's going to be sinusitis and bronchitis and strep throat. It's not just going to be a little fatigue. It's going to be chronic fatigue. It's going to be immobility, just complete lethargia. So the face will start to show it. It will always start to show it. It will always be increased. The amplification will increase. And then what do people do? They say, "Oh man, I have a fever." Well, let me suppress that fever, because you should have a fever. A fever is burning off the pathogens. It's burning the bad stuff off. What did our grandparents do with their garbage in the old days? I mean, now I guess grandparents are getting a bit younger, but my grandparents burned their garbage. They lived in a rural place and they burned their garbage, and that's the way people did it before, in the last century anyway, in rural places. So burning the garbage makes sense, and so that's why the body has this inner this ability to burn off what shouldn't be there. So if we suppress the fire, if we suppress the fever, then we're preventing those things which should be burned off from being burned off, so they're going to continue to be there. So greater symptoms are going to appear. And then that just increases until the person is on medication around the clock. They have way more severe issues. It's even things like emotional symptoms. So if we suppress our tears, if we suppress our sadness, then it's going to come through in a more acute way. I believe that Parkinson's and Bell's palsy and all of these and seizures are related to the body holding incoherent energy, and the body wants so badly to shake it off. It's never given the opportunity to shake it off in a safe place with understanding and the ability to comprehend the environment for the person to comprehend that there's room and space has to be created for them to release this accumulated incoherent energy. And so then it does it without invitation, because it has to shake it off. Same thing with strokes. So strokes, seizures, Bell's palsy, Parkinson's are all related to a deeper emotional suppression. And then there's, of course, the expression, suppression, depression connection, call it. If we suppress our expression, we're going to wind up with depression, and that's the connection. So basically what happens is, when you take in the substances, the toxic substances, you're taking them in along with a mental field, an emotional field. So when you remove them, when you actually do the deep tissue cleansing work and the waste comes out, it's carrying out with it the mental, emotional, energetic space that you were in when you consumed it. So in that way, it's such a huge release. And often people they can find it really unsettling to be unburdened by that, because they don't know what it feels like. They forgot what it felt like not to have that in them. They got so used to the feeling of having that inside of themselves on all those levels. So it's really important to keep in mind that there's going to be an unfamiliar emptiness, an unfamiliar spaciousness that comes with these huge waste releases, because the waste is holding. It's the waste itself. It's the pathogens in the waste. It's the emotional field and the mental space that everything was in when it was taken in. There's so much to that waste. It's like it's unfathomable, and probably things that we don't even realize. So when that leaves, it's going to leave a vacuum. But that vacuum is where the space, it's the conditions our body the body is meant to be in to begin with. We're meant to be mostly empty space, but we're not used to that sensation. So be prepared for that space. Look forward to it, and when you feel it, instead of becoming antsy around it, think, oh, this means I've been successful. So what am I now going to fill this space with? Be very, very conscious. There's all this vacuum of space. Let me let me fill it with an embrace of freedom. Let me fill it with the curiosity for what's to come. Let me make sure that no matter what, it doesn't get filled up with the same patterns, the same mental patterns, the same emotional dramas. Let me be really careful what I expose myself to in the next 24, 48 hours. Like, not to watch anything violent, not to have conversations with people that you know will set you off, not to do anything that would bring you back into those patterns. And then what will happen is the body will reach a new state of attunement, and you'll get really comfortable with that feeling, and then you'll desire it, because you will remember it as that natural, authentic state of your being. It's a very sensitive moment when you have that release, and it's like, and if no one tells you and prepares you for it, then you could very easily fall into the old ways of doing things. But if you are prepared and you do know that you have a choice to make in that moment, and you're conscious of it, you can really up level. And those are the kinds of moments in time, the junctures, the intersections, where if you just know which way to go, you can be on a whole new track with your life. You know, it's such an interesting question, because I would like to address alcoholism in a bigger context. It's very, very interesting. Alcohol is, and all spirits are called spirits for a reason. They are entities. So when we're consuming alcohol or drugs, we're putting an intelligence, an entity, a field of intelligence, whether that a field of intelligence / personality, but not yours, not your authenticity, not your essence. You're putting something foreign that is acidic by nature. So it's an entity, an intelligence, a personality that's not favorable to your being. It's not copacetic with your being. And that's going into you. And the more you put it in, the more that personality, intelligence, self-motivated entity fills your space. So it's almost like it displaces you. So bearing in mind that when we do the deep tissue cleansing and we're actually removing the waste, you're going to start removing that entity, the compilation of entities, really, because often it's multiple forms of alcohol. But as you release that, and as you replace that space with alkalinity, which is the life force, which is the healthy electrons, which is totally copacetic and totally coherent with the true essence of the human being, then you start to restore your space to being something that is going to be positively empowering, is going to give you clarity, is going to enable you to rise above the inclinations you would have had previously to indulge and engage with these entities that had such an easy passage into you before, because your boundaries were down, because they were taking over, they were running the show, they took over the kingdom. So we're getting them out, restoring the boundaries, restoring the clarity, and then you're going to have a lot more strength. So it brings into conversation a very taboo subject, which is these centers, the rehab centers, how they work, do they work, and not just rehab for alcohol and drugs, but rehab for eating disorders, which I have a major issue with these eating rehab centers. I have so many clients that have gone to them, suffered in them, and not succeeded, and there's a massive reason why. The fundamental reason why is you're never going to help an eating disorder patient heal until you change their consciousness. Trying to change habits, first of all, it's pushing boulders up mountains against storms. It's just hard for them. It's hard for the people trying to, and truthfully, the people who are in these healing centers are not healed. So they purport to be healed. They act as if they're healed. They wear, paraphernalia and regalia and white coats and whatever to look like they're healed, or they wear their suits. Oh, put a suit on anyone. You could take anyone from off the street, clean them up, give them a shave, do their hair, or put some nice clothes on them, and they will look like they were born that way. Okay. A lot of facading going on. I don't think that's a word. I'm going to make this word up. A lot of facading. So until a person is out of the matrix, is out of the cultural conditioning, and starts to understand unity consciousness and where things went wrong and where they got cut off from the network of life, and why that's the reason that they are so tangled up inside. And that's why, disordered eating basically means chaotic eating. Everyone eats in a disordered way. So to say, we've got our textbook eating disorders, but basically the whole world is eating chaotically, is eating in a disordered way. So hopefully that will make those textbook eating disordered people listening feel a whole lot better, because there's nothing that actually, and what the textbook eating disordered patients, individuals should really feel good about is that there's the knowingness in them, the internal antenna for truth is so looking for order, and what they're seeking is order. They're not getting the guidance, they haven't gotten the guidance they need to understand how to have functional order. So they're after, what they wind up creating is a dysfunctional order, is something that is suppressing, that's like dysfunctional controlling, but they're not wrong to seek order, they're not wrong to seek control, but what they need is functional order, they need functional control, and what I do in this work is teach what that is and how to obtain that, because functional order, of course, brings us to higher states of being. It's I call it the angelic work, going from chaos to order, and then higher states of order. But dysfunctional order keeps people in these cycles of pain and suffering. So getting them to eat a certain number of calories a day, just to keep them alive and all that. There's a whole different way to keep them alive. I'm not saying don't, let them die. I'm saying let's just get rid of that paradigm entirely, because we know it doesn't work, and bring something that does. First of all, if anyone is concerned that their child or friend or mother or anyone they know or love is on the verge of perishing because of anorexia, or in some way not receiving the nutrition they need to stay alive, there's a very easy solution for that, and it is juicing. And I don't know any eating disorder patient, client, individual who is afraid to drink a green juice. It's like, first of all, it's hardly any calories. And that's where we also have to completely revisit the calorie paradigm, because it's totally erroneous, false. What the person needs in order to stay alive is life force. And the life force comes from the sun. And the sun synthesizes its energy into chlorophyll. And that chlorophyll enters the body, and it will adaptogenically give the body whatever it needs. So just start giving the person some green juice. And then you know that you're good, and you know you've got quantities of minerals, quantities of chlorophyll, life force, vitamins, without freaking them out about the calories that they've become so afraid of. Educate them about calories later. Teach them about unity consciousness. Get them truly healing, and then food will take on a totally different place in their lives. It will no longer be the hugely feared thing that it has become for them. However, food is totally misunderstood in our culture. I often say, just because we have a mouth doesn't mean we should be eating all the time. Just because we have a mouth doesn't mean we should be talking all the time. It's rich for me to say, given the fact that I've been talking for the last 3 days. But just because we have a digestive tract doesn't mean we're supposed to be consuming to digest all the time. Just because we have sexual organs doesn't mean we should be, having orgasms all day long. Tell that to these porn addicts. They don't think that's the case. So, but basically, there is a wonderful way to go about healing anyone with any addiction, anyone who's defeating, is in a life-defeating pattern. And I don't believe that these facilities, doing it the old-fashioned way, doing it the way it's been done the last 50 years, are getting it right. This idea, once a bulimic, always a bulimic, once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic, I don't believe that's true either. I believe that that's just, a very convenient way for those who are in the position of making these rules. It gives them, more authority to make the rules. I don't believe that. I've seen plenty of cases, that's not the case, But it's all about how it's approached. So, for example, if you, and I should speak personally as well, because I did suffer extensively from anorexia and bulimia both, and they are awful places to be. But in all the efforts before I became enlightened around how to actually heal somebody with these textbook eating disorders, I went down all the normal routes. I did not go to a facility. Thank goodness I didn't have to do that. But I healed myself actually, which was remarkable, and that's part of why I do the work I do. But I did go to many therapists who, talk therapy and all this stuff that just never worked, never ever worked. And my mom even sent me to a Christian Science practitioner, thinking that, and they're telling me, I'm sitting in front of this Christian Science practitioner who's telling me that I'm going to be fine when I leave the office. I just need to know that I don't actually have this problem, and it's just, and it's funny because now I look back, because I spent many years in the Christian Science church, and I understand the deeper message that I believe Mary Baker Eddy, who is the founder of Christian Science, was trying to communicate. But in probably 12 years of going to Sunday school in the Christian Science church, I never got the message that I understand now. It was so confusing, and it didn't make any sense. And so you got sick, but you didn't take anything. But because you were identifying with this idea that you could have no sin, disease, or death because God couldn't, and you were made in the image of God, but you were still doing all the things that caused the problem. So, and you were still, even though maybe you wanted to espouse this idea because it sounded good, you were still in the cultural conditioning. So it just didn't add up at all. And I feel like it's been a very sad waste of time for a lot of people in their spiritual pursuits. It's nice to sing the hymns, lots of pretty hymns, but there's a limit to that too. I think that what if in the most positive light, the biggest what's the term? If I was to really give Mary Baker Eddy the benefit of the doubt, it would be that she understood that at our essence we were made of pure consciousness, and pure consciousness can't get sick. But then we have to actually become pure consciousness and get in and behave as pure consciousness would behave, which is totally an interconnected network lifestyle. So, but they weren't teaching that at the church. I remember going to camp, to Christian Science camp, going to Christian Science school, and we were eating Captain Crunch and milk for breakfast. I don't know how that's consciousness embodied. So, I had a lot of fun at the camp, don't get me wrong, it was awesome. But it wasn't going to keep me from getting sick, And so I do believe that that a person, once we're healed, truly healed, we don't have these limitations where, you can never have a drink again, or you're an alcoholic for that. Now identify as an alcoholic, but all these identifications are taking us away from the true identification. In fact, I was thinking today about how, because there's this whole transgender thing, I not for the wrong reasons, for all those people who would like to say, she's prejudiced against transgender. No, I believe it's being used as a ploy against people to take their power, not to give them more power. When we get into trans, we want to think about transformation, transfiguration. And we don't do that by changing our gender. We do that by changing our consciousness. So this is why the transgender group is suffering more from suicide. The percentages of transgender suicides are, I don't know what the numbers are, we can look them up, but they are so high, they're astronomically higher than the normal, than the public, the non-transgender public. So this idea that transforming our gender makeup is going to solve our problems is so obviously ridiculous. To change something, to change the form of something, is not so ridiculous if we're changing its mindset form. So that's transformation. So we do need to transform, but we need to transform by changing our consciousness, and then we will also transfigure. So that the trans needs to be a trans consciousness. We have to move from. So trans means to go between, to move across. Trans is literally across. So we need to cross the chasm from cultural conditioning, from Kardashian consciousness, to true network of life consciousness, unity consciousness. And that's the transformation that will create a transfiguration that will give us the true joy that we're looking for, the freedom. It's not freedom to tell somebody they can change their gender, but not help them change their consciousness. Let's do the opposite. Let's get their consciousness to change, and then see if they want to change their gender. And if they do in that case, fabulous, no problem. But to feed the idea that they're going to be happier changing their gender when their consciousness stays exactly the same, they're going to be in even more pain. It's even greater confusion, and it creates absolute chaos in the body because the hormones, everything is thrown out of whack. It's taking, remember that whenever we take anything from order to chaos, that's the opposite of angelic work. I won't name it, but everyone knows what the opposite of angelic work is, right? And it starts with an S. Okay, I'll say it. It's satanic work. It actually is satanic work. It is taking that which is life generating and flipping it over. It's taking the framework of life and undermining it. That's why lived spelled backwards is devil. That's why live spelled backwards is evil. Okay, it's all in our language. It's right there in front of us. So go ahead and do all the superficial stuff you want to do. If you still feel called to do it after your consciousness changes, and that's and if you love yourself enough to to think, oh, I love myself so much, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z for myself. I'm going to get boobs. I'm going to get my lip injections. I'm going to get my Botox. I'm going to change my gender. I'm going to get my sports car and all these ridiculous things. If you change your consciousness and you still want those things, no problem. But if it's coming from the mainstream consciousness, you're always going to be miserable. Doesn't matter how. And it's been proven.
And you're going to be in chaos as well because your body is
increased chaos. It's going to get worse. You're going to be even more depressed. And it's been proven that things like plastic surgery, for example, are addictive. They're acidic and they're addictive. And people must remember that the definition of acidity, the definition of addiction, is acidic substance that you need more of all the time, and you can't get enough of it. You can't get away from it. So in a way, plastic surgery, transgender, all of these things, the message is the same. If you change your consciousness and you still want those things, you probably won't. If you still do, then you're at least in an empowered, clear state to do so. You're doing it consciously. If you're not in unity consciousness, you're doing it unconsciously. You're doing it because of the social conditioning and the pressures and the belief systems that you've been fed, and so you're actually just executing something that is going to cause you to further unravel. It's coming from the wrong place. It's going through the wrong lens. It's kind of like you want to say to the person, here, wait, put these glasses on and look at it, and then see how you feel about it. Just the lens being consciousness, a different perspective, a different understanding.
Yeah.
And because most people are trying to fix their pain, and whenever you reach externally to fix your pain, you're going to grab for something that you're going to try to plug into your hole, when it's actually because you don't have access to your essence that you feel like you have an emptiness. There is no emptiness. That empty space should be filled with pure consciousness, pure spirit. Your soul should be expanding through your being, and it should actually radiate in a radius around you many, many feet. The degree to which your soul will expand within that radius, the extent of its expansion will be the degree to which you've grown and increased your soul quotient. So if we don't do that work and we do the other work, we're just going to keep on putting stuff into our system that is going to further clog it, further suppress our truth, make us even more miserable. So it's what I'm saying is, I hear the pain, I hear the suffering, I understand. I've been there. I've totally been there. I've had my head in a toilet. I've been anorexic. I've thought there was no other way out but suicide. I've done the overeating thing. I've done the over-exercising thing. I've done all of it. I mean, things they aren't even coming to mind. I've done them. I remember when I was my first year at NYU, I thought to myself, wait, maybe I can accomplish several things at once, because I want to get and stay really skinny and not really have to be fully in this world. So if I could just drink Seagram's 7 and 7, I wouldn't eat. I'd be a little bit drunk all day, and I would basically get it all done. I was going to go on the 7-7 diet. I mean, it hasn't even been out there yet. I sort of invented that when I was 17. I was 17 in my freshman year at NYU, and that's what was going through my head. Let me do the Seagram 7-7 diet. The first diet I invented. So I understand the pain. I didn't do it. I think I just wouldn't. I don't know what it was. You know what? Actually, I was just too hungry. But so I just stuck with the bulimia for a little while longer. Anyway, yeah. So I've been there. The point is, I've been there. I understand the pain, and I don't want the idea is not. There's no condemnation. It's like let me help you get out of the pain and suffering in a real way, instead of enabling it and in some way profiting off of it. I mean, you do wonder, like, these places are hugely expensive, these rehabilitation centers. And they know that most people aren't getting well. There's a very low percentage of people who actually stay sober and don't come back. And they know they're going to profit off you when you need to come back again. I mean, I hate to put it out there so bluntly, but it always seems to be that if you follow the trail, it goes back to somebody who's profiting off of your addiction, your suffering, your inability to actually get your power back. I think what happens is everyone is so badly abused. And what we do with that abuse and the direction we take that abuse it can take a variety of forms. So I'm not saying that look, I think one of the big problems is that all of the hormone imbalances that men and women are carrying are being transmitted to their seed and their soil, their ovaries and their sperm. So the egg, basically the seed and soil, the eggs and the sperm, are holding patterns of DNA that have been degenerated, and the chaos and the hormones is in there. So that in today's world, children are being born with disordered hormones, and that creates disorder. It's chaos. It's confusion. So what I'm getting to, I guess, is that there is a big problem in terms of the hormone imbalances. But if we could get into a clarity of consciousness, we could approach it in a way that is going to bring greater healing to the person and not greater unraveling. It may mean that if the hormones are so out of whack that the person wants to choose their gender, that they can. And a conscious, mature person choosing their gender, given the fact that there is so much disruption of hormones, and they want to settle themselves in one gender, is acceptable, absolutely acceptable. And I think we do have to recognize that with all the degeneration that's happening with our offspring, that is an outcome that's as relevant as being born with Down syndrome or being born with hyperactive attention disorder, whatever it is. There's being born without healthy organs, and it is a handicap. It's not to say that the people we're going to. It's a handicap in the sense that they need care. It needs attention, because if we provide the right care and attention, we can make their lives better. They can have a better life experience, maybe a great life experience, possibly a great life experience if it's really tended to properly. Otherwise, there's going to be suffering, and wherever one person suffers, we all suffer. and nobody benefits from the suffering of another. So there's this complete. If we don't look clearly and see correctly the pain and how to address it, the handicap and how to address it in our human family, we're going to suffer from the pain too. We're not getting away free, because it's in their body. It's affecting everybody in its own way. I mean, we might not be able to identify necessarily exactly how, but it's affecting our ease, so that we have a disease. It may be emotional, it may be mental, it may be spiritual, it may be energetic, but it is affecting us because we are all one. And that's what happens when you get into unity consciousness. You put that together. And it's not just a theoretical thing. It's like, oh, I feel that. And you do become more empathetic, and you do pick up on other people's feelings. You need to know how to differentiate between what's yours, what's theirs, but knowing that there's a fluidity in the whole human body, the collective. But I think there's a lot of factors we need to look at. In fact, you said yesterday, you brought up this idea of how the elders would communicate, and when there wasn't a clear solution, the elder would say, when asked, "What do you think?" he said, "I think we need to discuss this further." So that's what I think in this situation. I think we need to really look at every aspect of it, and with absolute compassion. Why not? Why would we address anything without compassion? Why would we address anything from a judgmental standpoint? We want to have discernment, and discernment and judgment are completely different things. So when we're able, discernment means that we're coming to a conundrum, a problem, with a full spectrum of how life works, with a full spectrum of the laws of life, the laws of the universe, natural laws. And from that perspective, we are able to determine whether something is life-generating or life-deteriorating. That's all discernment is. It's very, very simple. How can we make it more life-generating and less life-deteriorating? What's the best choice under the circumstances? Judgment comes from social conditioning, the programming, the knee-jerk reaction. Oh no, I don't believe in that. And that's always the small-minded people are judgmental. Open-minded people are discerning. And to be open-minded doesn't mean that you're open to rubbish. Doesn't mean you're open to everything. It means that you're able. In a way, a better term might be vast-minded people. Because open implies a kind of like, oh, I might take that in. It might not be very smart, but I'll take it in because I'm open-minded. Vastly minded people, expansively minded people have an ability to, and a desire to take in perspectives or hear others' perspectives without it corrupting their clarity, but without needing to change somebody else's mind or make them think they're wrong. They don't need to evangelize or to change somebody. They can very easily listen. And also, a vastly and expansively minded person is the person you want to go to for advice and guidance, because they're not going to tell you, something based on their conditioning. They're going to tell you something. They're going to tell you based on their grasp of life and the various outcomes that will manifest based on the choice that you make. Exactly. Think about it in those terms, right? And in the meantime, work on other things. Build your body up. Get strong. Whatever your gender is currently, make it strong and beautiful. Clean out your tissues so that when you do decide, if you do decide to change, or if you decide to stay as you are, you're going to be vibrant, and you're going to have creative energy, and you're going to feel so loving, and you're not going to walk into, often also this whole gender identification thing has too much to do with sex. Like, are we changing our gender based on our sexual drives? We don't. We want to operate from here or from here, really from here out, but not from here. This is, the sexual drive is dangerous. It results in a lot of bad choices, and it winds up wreaking a lot of havoc in people's lives. We need to govern that area. Absolutely express from the beauty that can be had and enjoyed. That's great, but to have your whole life be determined by your sexual drive is rule number one, you don't do that. It's the same thing as having your life driven by your palate. Same thing. It's sensual pleasure. If our senses are driving our choices, we're always going to make the choice that is about our pleasure rather than the right choice. So, if pleasure drives the palate, then we're going to eat sugar and starch and all the acidic things that make us addicted. Goes back to entities as well, because once those pathogens are in the body because of all the sugars and starches they love to live on, they want to make sure it's continuing to happen, continuing to be provided for them. So they're going to drive you to consume it. And to believe that sexual consumption is not consumption is wrong. It's absolutely consumption. You are consuming energy. Someone is consuming your energy. And that is not the only way to engage sexually. And this is a whole other conversation, but it's interesting. In the same way that anti-energetic forces will feed off of us, and that's the anti-energetic, antithetical way of engaging as a living being. There is anti-energetic sexual exchange, and there's life-generating sexual exchange. So wherever there is conductivity rather than consumption, you're engaging in a positive sexual exchange. So that the power should not diminish; it should only increase. Whereas with most people, they're seeking pleasure, and they're having a combusting kind of sexual experience, which may make them feel like they're having the ultimate experience, but they're drained afterward. The man is drained. He usually falls asleep right after, and there's and the woman is usually left feeling a little bereft after, a little emotionally, usually, unless there's been an energetic exchange, a positive a conductivity of energy, they're both drained afterwards. So the combustion happens. It's a centrifugal effect. It's a waste, a loss of energy, as opposed to a centripetal conservation of energy kind of sexual exchange. So while these people are trying to figure out their gender, where they really want to land, they should be pondering how they want to engage. How it's not even, obviously the sexual engagement is one part, but everything we do should be conservation of energy, should be conductivity. Otherwise what we have is exploitation. So, and that's usually what goes on in our culture, is exploitation. That's why we have the hierarchies we have, which are dysfunctional hierarchies. There is functional hierarchy, like the way oceans and water systems work, the way mountain systems work. Everything in nature has a natural hierarchy that benefits the whole. But what we have in culture, in our society, is dysfunctional hierarchy, which is the higher up you are, the more you can exploit that which is beneath you. There's a great story. I mean, almost every Dr. Seuss story is like, there's so many things in there. But the Sneetches, by the way, is amazing. But the Yertle the Turtle. Everyone should read Yertle the Turtle. You know Yertle the Turtle. Okay, so it's just, yeah, case in point. But but in effect well, Christ said it best. The greatest of all is servant to all. That which will maintain the cycle of regeneration, the centripetal force, where everything gets fed and then it comes back in. It's the toroidal field. It's the regeneration. So in our culture, it's all exploitation. And where we find exploitation, we find loss of energy. We will only find ultimate disrepair. And if we can restore a functional hierarchy, which means that the leader is the servant. The leader's not in a leadership position because of what he seeks to get from the people he's above. He's not above them. He's actually in the center, driving the regeneration and the protection. He will die for the group. It's a self-sacrificial role, and that's why they're revered and they're loved. They're revered and loved as opposed to feared. But even like leaders of households that, they think nothing about what they use their dollar to purchase. Maybe they treat their employees badly. Leaders of companies, like, who's in charge? That you will know the destiny of a household, of a corporation, of a country, of anything, if you know the consciousness that their leader is embodying. If they're seeking to serve themselves, doesn't matter how well they're doing right now. Just give it a few years; it's going to crumble. Yeah, the long-term plan. And that's why it's actually it's interesting because you see all these companies talking about corporate responsibility and sustainability. So it's all coming to consciousness. It's that 100th monkey effect. It's all starting to happen on every level. People understand that they can't get away. Organizations suffer in the long term. It's an old way of thinking. It's an antiquated, dark ages way of thinking that that the big guys at the top with the big corner offices are the ones who who should be benefiting. In fact, I think office structures are changing as well, and there's like more open plans, and it's less about I'm the big head honcho, so I should have this. It's okay. Well, what do you think? What do you need? Does everybody have
hot desking as opposed to corner offices?
Exactly, and sharing, revenue sharing, and a lot more. You'll find that it used to be that you would get your salary and maybe you get you have your retirement and maybe a gold watch at the end of the day, but now everyone in the conscious companies, everyone's getting a piece of the pie. So it's getting closer to living systems operating in a functional way. So much good change, and now it needs to be directed in an intelligent way, because the way it's going is there's chaos at play, and that needs to be rectified. And the more people start to understand how things work and they act it out in their own lives, in their own bodies first and foremost, their own being first and foremost, and then that extends into their families and communities, then things can really change.